For thousands of years, human beings have followed one incredibly consistent rule when burying their dead: seal the tomb. Ancient architects engineered massive stone slabs, carved out hidden labyrinth entrances, and even rigged mechanical traps to secure high-value graves. Look closely at the mechanics of these defenses, and you'll notice a clear directional logic. Every heavy door and deadfall is built to face outward, operating as a shield against grave robbers and the living. The architectural intent was universal. A tomb was designed to be an impenetrable sanctuary, built to protect the dead from the outside world. But when archaeologists began excavating a seemingly ordinary ancient burial ground, they uncovered a grave that broke this rule entirely. This image shows the excavated skeleton exactly as it was discovered. The physical layout of the remains immediately alerted researchers that something was deeply wrong with this burial. Attached directly to the physical remains of the deceased was a heavy forged iron padlock. The mechanics of this restraint present a massive functional paradox. Placing a lock on the inside of a grave, clamped around a corpse, offers zero protection against wild animals or thieves. The builders weaponized security to physically restrain the corpse, revealing a community living in terror of their own dead. The most common archaeological hypothesis for finding metal hardware in a grave is that it represents immense material wealth. However, researchers quickly discarded this idea. The surrounding dirt contained absolutely no other grave goods, and the padlock itself featured a strictly utilitarian, brutalist design meant for heavy labor, not display. The next logical assumption was that the deceased was a dangerous criminal, shackled as a form of eternal punishment. Yet the physical evidence contradicts this as well. The body was placed in consecrated ground with the exact same care and orientation as the surrounding graves, violating standard practices for outcasts or executed prisoners. Since mundane logic fails to explain the hardware, the lock had to serve a deeply specific, terrifying psychological function for the surviving community. To understand that function, we have to look at the historical backdrop of the era. Communities during this period were frequently devastated by sudden, cataclysmic events, like plagues or unexplained cascading deaths. This archival illustration shows a plague doctor, providing a window into how the pre-scientific mind desperately attempted to assign a physical cause and response to these invisible biological threats. When entire families began dying off in rapid succession, terrified villages turned to the folklore concept of the revenant. A revenant is a terrifying mythical belief that the first victim of an illness would suddenly wake up and return from the grave to infect their surviving relatives. The psychological terror of the revenant was directly tied to the physical act of the burial. With no understanding of germ theory, disease transmission was literally conflated with the supernatural rising of the dead. So the padlock functioned as a desperate, primitive public health measure implemented by a society terrified of contagion. If you isolate the internal mechanism of one of these ancient iron padlocks, you see the unbreakable mechanical engineering at play. Clamping this hardware directly onto a skeletal extremity or pinning the jaw shut created a permanent physical tether. The intended outcome of this specific placement was highly literal. They were physically preventing the corpse from chewing through its burial shroud or walking back to the village. There is a tragic contrast between the heavy, physical reality of the forged iron and the invisible, biological reality of the disease they were actually fighting. The community had reached the absolute limits of their understanding. They were attempting to cure a biological terror with structural engineering. When you look past the artifact itself, you have to consider the immense grief and trauma required for a family to desecrate the grave of a loved one. The padlocked tomb stands as a tragic historical document, recording the absolute desperation of a community under siege. Today, we understand physical security as a way to protect our property and belongings from the outside world. Here, that logic is perfectly inverted to contain an absolute horror. The engineering of ancient locks exposes what a society valued and provides an iron mirror for exactly what they feared.